Astam, pe witaski min. Astam, pe wit apamin. Astam, pe kitipi kiskwe min. Astam, pe wiche matu min. Astam, mio ayimu chikkeitan. Astam, pe wiche papi min. Astam, pe wiche pakuse yimmu min. Astam, nika no te tan. Come, let's make peace together. Come, sit with me. Come, speak the truth with me. Come, cry with me. Come, speak of good things with me. Come, laugh with me. Come, hope with me. Come, let's walk forward together. I will do a land acknowledgement in Cree and then in English. Ninisitawe itenan umaaski ka takiskatamak nikotwa sikat kitsi asotamato win ka itamek uta iki utaskanesichik mitzet iinawak uta ki mawatsa hitawak kitse hitawin ekwa kisteyimuwin nimiana nak utatsimu winuwawa upikiskwe winuwawa winuwawa ekwa isita winuwao ukikakyao inuwak. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather in Treaty 6 territory is the traditional gathering place for many Indigenous people. We honor and respect the history, languages, ceremonies, and culture of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who call this territory home. And we welcome you. So tanse nito temtik, Naomi McElraith, Nitsika Sun. And I come to you in the spirit of truth and reconciliation here on Treaty 6 land, where we are all treaty people. E askika na kisoyak. So I am an Indigenous person. I am Métis, and my story is I am Aboriginal Indigenous on my mom's side, and we have Cree and Ojibwe and English and Scottish and French on my mom's side. My late father, he passed away in 2005 from ALS. He was a white man, but he was raised on First Nations reserves for 10 years as a child. So from the age of 4 to 14, he lived on reserves. Specifically, he lived on the Frog Lake First Nation and the Fishing Lake First Nation and the Elizabeth Métis settlement. And there he was the only white child, and he was immersed in Cree language and culture. And so he came to speak Cree fluently. He spoke Cree so well, we say, e kipa kaskit, which means his Cree was so good, it was like bright colors. My mom, on my mom's side, my mom is still with us. My mom and I live together. I'm looking after her. She's a beautiful Métis woman, but because of our colonial history, the language and culture have been disconnected from her. So this is, I find myself, I mean, you're looking at a person who, until I told you I'm Aboriginal, you didn't know that because I look very white. And I was telling Mila recently that I'm quite self-conscious about appearing white. And in fact, sometimes, to be very honest with you, I'm ashamed of my white skin because of the history of white supremacy. but I am who I am, and I have to get past that to be more comfortable with who I am. So my mother's name is Lavona Lillian McElraith. My father's name is Moet Edgar McElraith. My father's parents were Charles and Davida McElraith. My mom's parents were Lucabelle and James Meeks. So that's who I'm from. I'm from Amisquatsi-Waskaikanik, which is Beaver Mountain House. I'm from Edmonton. That's another name for Edmonton. So I'm actually going to show you something that was given to me about 20 minutes ago. This is tobacco. I was telling one of my Indigenous colleagues that I was doing a prayer and reading a poem. And so she gave me some tobacco. I'm just going to show it to you. It smells really nice. It's not the typical tobacco in cigarettes. Sometimes if that's the only thing you can get, then it's okay to use a cigarette. If you're approaching an elder and you need special advice or a prayer, but you can also buy, there's a place on White Avenue and the name of it escapes me right now, but I can send the name to Mila, where you can buy, I think it's called California Gold. You can buy special tobacco that's like ceremonial tobacco. So when my friend Brittany heard that I was going to do a prayer and read a poem, she offered me this tobacco, and I'm offering it to you as a teaching now. Tobacco has very important cultural meaning for Indigenous peoples in North America, and now with cigarettes, it's been kind of corrupted, but now we're going back to the traditional tobaccos because it has very important spiritual and healing meaning. And when we light us, we have something called a smudge, where we put sage in there and we light it, and then it's almost like incense in the Catholic religion. And when we light the tobacco, when the smoke rises, it connects us human beings here to the Creator. So this is some of the meaning of tobacco and the smudge. So Mila also asked me to tell you a little bit about my work here. I'm actually coming to you in the office, my supervisor's office at Fort Edmonton Park in the Indigenous Peoples Experience. So the Indigenous Peoples Experience is a brand new historic pavilion. I'm a longtime interpreter from Fort Edmonton. I'm not sure if you've been here before, but there are four time eras. There's 1846, which is the fort, the fur trade. There's 1885 Street, 1905 Street, and 1920 Street. The fort closed 3 years ago for renovations, but there's been a memorandum of understanding between the City of Edmonton, the Fort Edmonton Historical Foundation, the Treaty 6 First Nations, the Métis Nation of Alberta, and they put a lot of money in and they built this new pavilion called the Indigenous Peoples Experience. And I welcome you to come. The park will open up on Thursday, which is July 1st. We have traditionally called this Canada Day, but with the recent discoveries of children's bodies on the grounds of residential schools, the celebrations will be much subdued and more a time of reflection. So the Indigenous people, just quickly, the Indigenous Peoples Experience has kind of four main parts. There's the entryway where we kind of help you get ready. Then there's the seasons, the 4 seasons and the 13 moons. Then there's the Métis cabin and the meeting of the European Indigenous people in the Treaty Wall. There's been nothing about residential schools in those parts, but at the very end of it, at the end of the Indigenous Peoples Experience, there's a big round room with a film that runs every 7 minutes, and it lasts about 4 minutes, and it's music and images, some photographs, some live images of kind of the history of the trauma and the residential schools. And it's very hard to watch, but the very ending of the movie is very uplifting because it shows Indigenous people who are doing very well, doctors, lawyers, teachers, artists, painters, singers, to show the resilience of the community. So I'm going to read a poem that I wrote, but just before I say that, I just would like to share that I feel that my purpose in life is to be a peacemaker. I'm a second-born child, and there is some theory that the second-born has to make the peace between everybody. And so I really believe that my role is to bring people together at the table to talk and have conversation. And so with that, I will read this poem that I wrote about 10 or 12 days ago to honor the 215 children at Kamloops Residential School. And the numbers have changed since the discovery at the Oasis Residential School. That's not how they're saying it on the news, but they're mispronouncing it because the spelling is incorrect. So Oasis. So the numbers will be slightly different. So this has some Cree in it, and the Cree that you see, the English that's just before, just after is the translation. Pe kiweta hik, bring them home. What can a poem do but to speak the truth? Ka tap wait, to shout the truth. Ka tape wait. Step one of Indigenous grief, my friend Shannon tells me. Pe kiweta hik. What can a poem do but whisper? Ikite makitawa kik. Our deep, unwhisperable sorrow for 966 children. Spell it out. 966 small bodies. Count it out. 198,990 small bones. Pe kiwetahik. What can a poem do but utter a prayer? E ayame hestamawa kik. For 966 children, for thousands of other children who never saw their families again, ever. Pe kiwetahik. What can a poem do when it can't reach stage 4 of grief? Laughter. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. Not until the children come home. Not until the Pope says sorry for the crimes of the church. Not until governments stop apologizing while doing so little. Not until we all walk with our Indigenous sisters and brothers on the mean streets of Canada. Pe kiwetahik. Not until the children come in from the dark. Namoya, patama e pita kwetwawe. Oasasak ite otse ka wana tipis kayek. Pe kiwetahik. Pe kiwetahik. Pe kiwetahik. Pe kiwetahik. Just to end, last week, my mother will be 82 in 2 weeks, and her mind is very, very good, very sharp, but her body is failing her. She has multiple sclerosis and very bad arthritis. So I took her, she's telling lots of stories. So I took her on a memory trip to Saskatchewan, to where she was born and to where her parents were born. And where she was born was in a little town right beside the Muskowekwan First Nation. And I took this picture of the residential school, and I sent my poem and the picture to the Cree Literacy Network. And so they posted the picture. And I think that's what Mila is sharing with you here. So that that's what I'm going to share with you today. I want to say kinanas kumitina wow mistahe. Ay hi mistahe. Thank you so very much for the honor to meet with you today. And I'm very sorry. We have, in fact, I'm coming from work and we have Indigenous people here who are blessing this space. And the drummers and the dancers are down there, and there's people coming through. And some people are quite affected by the film. So I must go downstairs now. I can't tell you how much I appreciate.
Naomi, I think we've lost her, Naomi.
I'm still here. I'm still here.
You're phrasing quite a bit. So I'll close for you if you have anything else to say. But what I'd like to express is thanks, salamat, for your presence today. And we hope that one day we will all be able to step foot in the new facility and get together and meet you in person. So I hope, forgive me for the pronunciation, but hi. And thank you for your participation in our event today. So we really appreciate it, and we will see you soon.
Okay, thank you, and come and see me here.
We will. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Philippine Heritage Month and happy Multiculturalism Day here in Canada. My name is Jeanette Dotimis. I am from Edmonton, and I'm honored to be your host today for a tour of Canada through Philippine eyes. This event is the first of its kind, bringing together 9 Filipinx writers from across the country. The diverse narratives from this diverse group will shed light on successes and challenges of our community, reveal systemic barriers faced by immigrants, and highlight Canadian heritage, diversity, and multiculturalism through our Filipino lens. If you have any questions for any of our guests today, including Naomi, please type them into the chat, as there will be a Q&A following all of our readings. Before we get into the program with our Filipinx writers, I would like to introduce a special guest, the Honorable Bardis Chager. She's the Minister of Diversity and Inclusion and Youth with the Government of Canada. Here she is to say a few words. Minister.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. I do want to start by acknowledging that I'm joining you all from Waterloo, Ontario, on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Neutral peoples. I think it's really important that we take time to acknowledge the land and know where we come from in the history of our country. It helps us actually have a clear vision of where we're going. And the reality is as we're all learning, we don't always necessarily know the true history of our country and the numerous contributions that many people have made. Unless you are Indigenous, everyone immigrated to these lands at some point. So I'd also like to acknowledge and thank the organizers of this virtual tour of Canada. And I want to give a thank you to Mila and Jeanette for the introduction and for all the work that you are all doing with your teams to pull this event together, but also beyond this event. Filipino Heritage Month has given us an opportunity to highlight the invaluable contributions that Canadians of Filipino descent have made to the social, economic, and cultural fabric of Canada. And did you know that Canada is home to nearly 1 million people of Filipino descent, making it one of the fastest growing communities in our country? I would like to also give a shout out to Salma Zaid, Member of Parliament for Scarborough Centre, who brought forward motion 155 to recognize Filipino Heritage Month. And this motion was actually jointly seconded by 19 Liberal members of Parliament, including Kevin Lamura, who is the Member of Parliament for Winnipeg North, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons, and also the Chair of the Canada-Philippines Inter-Parliamentary Friendship Group. And they have done some pretty impressive work, including having an exchange between the two countries so that we can actually learn from each other's peoples. This month and beyond, let us recognize communities of Filipino descent and celebrate the important role they have played and continue to play in creating an open, diverse, and consciously more inclusive society. This year's Filipino Heritage Month was great significance. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected all Canadians and disproportionately certain segments, including Asian communities. Comme l'a dit le Premier ministre Justin Trudeau, la haine et l'intolérance sous toutes ses formes sont absolument inacceptables au Canada. As Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said, hatred and intolerance in all of its forms are absolutely unacceptable in Canada. We must all step up and stand together against all forms of racism, xenophobia, and hate. It's on all of us to be allies and to work together to build safer and consciously more inclusive communities. I want to thank the organizers, supporters, volunteers, and all involved for finding innovative ways of connecting the community during a pandemic. I know this is no easy feat, but you have found a new way of celebrating Filipino artists and writers and amplifying Filipino stories. Learning, teaching, sharing. I'm happy that our government is supporting events like this one through Community Support, Multiculturalism, and Anti-Racism Initiative program, a program that is designed to do exactly what its name says, support communities. The Philippine Edmonton Events and Arts Society celebrates the Filipino community through art, history, and storytelling, providing meaningful and impactful opportunities to showcase the rich culture and heritage of Filipino Canadians. And with that, congratulations once more. Thank you to all the organizers, participants, volunteers, and artists around the Philippine Edmonton Events and Arts Society, as well as to the numerous frontline and essential workers of Filipino descent. Please know that you are appreciated and noticed, and I'm really grateful to you. And I look forward to now jump on to the Facebook side of this to watch the rest of the event and to broaden my horizons. So thank you, merci, and happy Filipino Heritage Month. Mabuhay.
Salamat, Minister Chagar, for taking the time out of your Sunday to join us today as well. Okay, let's take a little bit of a breath. We're going to get right into this. So I know that everyone's quite excited. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the first reader for today for a tour of Canada through Philippine eyes. This is our first reader, is Shirley Kamya. She is an award-winning poet, author, and filmmaker coming to us from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Here's Shirley.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Jeanette, for that introduction. Thank you, Minister Chagar, for your words, and especially a big thank you to Naomi for her very timely, heartfelt presence today and her very, very subdued, timely words that I know is affecting everybody that's here today. My name is Shirley Kamya, and I was born and raised in Winnipeg, so I am representing my hometown on Treaty 1, and it is a pleasure to be here with you all today. So I'm going to take you right into the first neighborhood that I want to introduce to you. It is called the West End of Winnipeg. It's where I grew up, and it was my world. So this little triangle you see in green is where I went to school, where I learned how to swim, where we went to the mall every weekend. And full disclosure, I am no longer living in Winnipeg. I'm in Toronto currently. And, you know, Winnipeg is a very, very special place in my heart. It's my spiritual home, and let's just say that because of this poem that I have that I wrote about my mother called A Short-Lived Visit, spiritually it connects me to Winnipeg. It was chosen for an art installation called Winnipeg Words. So 8 or 9 poets that have Winnipeg connections were chosen, and their words are on Winnipeg transit buses and different sites around Winnipeg. So it's lovely to be part of the community still in Winnipeg, even though I'm no longer physically there. And so I'm going to share the very first poem I have with you called A Short-Lived Visit. Under a tarnished coin of a full moon, your fragrance is caught in a gasp of gray mist. It flees like geese at the perch of the first cold. Dots in the sky, fireworks in reverse. So that is A Short-Lived Visit. It is from my latest collection of poetry called Mercy. And it's a collection that I wrote following the death of my mother. And for anybody who's lost a very special loved one knows the place that you're in, wherever it is, it changes when somebody very central in your life is no longer there. So if you see on the right, that's my old home. That's where I grew up in the West End. And when I passed by it for the first time, when my mother was no longer with us, it just felt so foreign. It just, the most central figure I had in my life that was no longer there, all those memories, everything became very unfamiliar. And it was such a strange experience for me to go through that. This house that I knew in and out for many years no longer was familiar. So I wrote about it in a poem called Morning One. And I'm going to share that with you now. We drive by our old house where the white paint fades and the yellow underneath is starting to bleed through. The plum tree chopped, the blossoms long withered. The one-car garage turned into two. Your polyester curtains hang like shadows in the windows, thick enough to hide the visitors in our home, making it their own. And that's Morning One. So I'm going to take you now to another area of Winnipeg called the Exchange District. And this is also a very special neighborhood to me, because as you'll see, image 3 is a building. If you know anything about Winnipeg, the Exchange District now is quite gentrified. It's got a lot of bars, cafes, art galleries. But in the 80s and 90s, when I was growing up, it had a lot of sewing machine factories. So a lot of Filipino women, like my mother, were garment workers who came in late 60s to early 80s in many waves to take up work in the garment trade, because the people who were currently doing those jobs, they were striking and they didn't want them because of the low wages. So the solution for the Manitoba government was to hire scores and scores of women from the Philippines. And it's a sacrifice that many of them made, because it was either $1 an hour or a quarter a day. And that was something that, you know, countless contributions, lots of sacrifices for the betterment of their families' lives, their lives, future generations. That's something that is incredibly important to me, because I wouldn't be here right now if it weren't for that decision my mom had made. So I'll take you inside. Girls World was the factory that my mom worked in, and I'll share that with you now. I nearly cut my finger once on a ferocious fang, piercing a denim skin. Among a chorus of scenes, an angry gasp from a sputtering machine. And so that is Girls World. And as you'll see in the last image, the one on the right there, that's my mother in front of her sewing machine station, and her best friend, my ninang Alice. And that's what it looked like inside Girls World. I spent a lot of time there growing up, and there were creaky floorboards, you know, titas all around, even titos, because there were bundle boys as well. And there was that air hose that I loved. It had, you know, nothing but air, but you blow it all over, so you got all the threads off of you at the end of the day. And I wrote a poem called Garment Worker. And this is a poem that pays tribute, as I mentioned, to the sacrifices that were made, the hardworking women that didn't complain, that wanted a better life for themselves and to everyone around them, and really to help grow Winnipeg's Filipino population to, it's about more than 75,000 plus people that it is now. They were really some of the pioneers of Winnipeg's population of, what is it now, 10% of the entire city's population is now comprised of Filipino. So they were quite integral to that. And so the last poem I want to share with you today is called Garment Worker, and it's a tribute to women like my mother. 8 hours dissolve into yesterday, this day, and the next. As busy fingers, blank eyes, and stitch after stitch alter the world. And that is Garment Worker. Thank you very much for going on my tour of Winnipeg. It was lovely to join you this afternoon. And as, critically acclaimed Winnipeg filmmaker Guy Madden said, my Winnipeg, this is my Winnipeg. It's made up of memories. I'm no longer living there, but again, it's very special to my heart. So thank you for listening.
Shirley, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing those experiences with us. And I don't think it goes without saying that we owe everything, including everything that we're experiencing today, due to our parents, specifically our mothers. They're in a league of their own. Okay, I'm going to move on. Our second reader is also an award-winning author, theater maker, producer, consultant, and teacher from Vancouver, British Columbia. Please welcome to the program, C.E. Gatchalian.
Hi, everyone. Everyone can hear me? Okay, good. All right. Magandang hapon sa lahat kayo. I'm C.E. Gatchalian. My pronouns are he, his, him. I'm live streaming today from the unceded, unsurrendered, and occupied territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, colonially known as Vancouver. My parents are from Imus, Cavite. They immigrated to Canada in 1971, and my ancestry is Tagalog, Ilocano, and Spanish. I'm so happy to be part of this event. Canada Day is approaching, and while I know that this country has been very good to many of us, I think we also need to acknowledge the atrocities that this country has been and is guilty of, especially with regards to its Indigenous population. So on Canada Day, let's please stand in solidarity with our Indigenous friends, colleagues, and family members. So today I'm reading from my my memoir, Double Melancholy, Art, Beauty, and the Making of a Brown Queer Man. This book is about my growing up and coming of age as a queer Filipinx man, and my wrestling with homophobia and white supremacy. But it's also very much a book about Vancouver. I was born, raised, and I'm still based here. And the excerpts that I'll be reading today deal with my Filipinx identity and my being part of the very large and vibrant Filipinx community here in Vancouver. Speaking mostly Tagalog at home and being brown didn't strike me as strange, living as we did in Vancouver's West End, which by the late 1970s had become a dense Babelian hotbed of multiple settler communities. From preschool to grade 12, I attended schools where white kids were the minority. Culturally, however, Tagalog notwithstanding, our household was very white. Virtually everything we watched on TV was white. And between the ages of 5 and 10, the music I most remember hearing was Judy Garland, who my mother was fixated on, and ABBA, who, for better or worse, were just ubiquitous. My mom and Lola seemed distinctly proud of two facts: their fair skin. Lola was a quarter Spanish, another fact they both seemed proud of, and that they hailed from Manila, or at least the general vicinity. Imus, Cavite was only 40 minutes away, and not, God forbid, the provinces, especially for some reason the Visayas. They weren't Bakyas, they told me. They had some privilege back home. Somehow, I grasped these as facts to hold on to when in doubt. So my early life was idyllic, and I was anxious to keep it that way. I think I was faintly aware that, like all paradisiacal illusions, it could rupture any second, and I remember being easily disquieted by anything or anyone that might precipitate that rupture. I developed an intense phobia of strangers. I would hide in my bedroom whenever we had guests and go into fits whenever a passerby on the street threw me what I interpreted as the evil eye. My mental space was my shelter, my sanctum. It would permit no aggression and no invasion. I've never been proud to be Filipinx, but I've never felt anything about being Filipinx, or more accurately, have aimed to feel nothing, like right-handedness, flat-footedness, or genetic predisposition to one condition or another. I thought it neither here nor there, an accident of birth. Being queer was different. That, I contended, was a spiritual condition involving one's innermost passions. But Filipinxness was a surface trait destined in the utopian future to be, like whiteness, invisible. And what better way to ensure this future than to never talk about it? I wasn't completely detached from my Filipinxness growing up. Not only did I speak Tagalog fluently until age 10, but Christmases provided me with overwhelming joy, mostly because of the Filipinx we surrounded ourselves with. I may not have cared much for most of them the rest of the year, but all that was duly forgotten every Pasko. Christmas Eve is where it's at for most Filipinx. Music, both Western and Filipinx, pop tunes and Christmas tunes, I would play on the piano and everyone would sing along. Food, 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 something from and for everyone. Pansit palabok, pansit bihon, lumpiang sariwa, lumpiang Shanghai, nilaga, caldereta, langgonisa, kuchinta, and rice, rice, rice. Everywhere rice. Endless overages of rice. The men smoking and drinking and playing cards in the kitchen. Mom and Lola chatting, gossiping and laughing with their wives. The other kids doing their thing and mercifully leaving me alone while I watched The Sound of Music on my own in the living room. Then it was off to midnight mass, the only time Mom, Lola, and I ever went to church, at the cathedral on Main and 12th, whose congregation was at least 85% Filipinx, one large, mostly brown, singing and worshiping and besotted organism. Didn't matter whether you bought into the lie that this was the Son of God's birthday. There were probably stragglers there who didn't believe in God at all. What mattered was what this communal connecting brought about, the weaving of an enormous thread, the temporary transcending of individual skin, the intangible surging warmth of a most disinterested and pure love. Maraming salamat. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute there. Thank you so much to CE Gatchalian for sharing your work and your experience with us. Up next is Alia Rasool. Alia is based in Toronto, Ontario. She has received awards for her artistry as a producer, a performer, and a storyteller. We're happy to hear from you today, Alia. Thank you.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for this space. My name is Alia Saniza Rasool, and I'm coming from Treaty 13. I have a project called 15 Ways My Dad Almost Died. It's about how I, as a storyteller in Toronto, am seeking my artistic voice through my father's stories. Most of the ways he almost died are interesting. Most interestingly, it happened 15 times. He told us heroic stories of what he survived during his youth, and we didn't think much of them until we began to really question why he had to survive the things he did. My dad used to tell me about this one time during martial law that he had to rummage through the ovens of a burnt down bakery to find bread for his family, and on his way home, he almost stepped on a landmine, but had the wherewithal to avoid it. This was his hero story. One day, my brother and I asked him, and this was when I was in my 30s, we finally asked him, wait, but why? Why did you have to do this? It's because he had lived through the 7-day siege of Jolo, wherein battling with Filipino Muslim insurgents, the government used napalm to raze the entire city to the ground. Jolo is the size of Vancouver, and it disappeared just like that. There was no outcry for Jolo. and we don't even remember that it happened. It feels like no one cares. I never talk about these things because for the most part, I am generally the only Filipino Muslim in the room, and I don't feel comfortable in these spaces. So why am I sharing this today? Because this is how I feel about living in Toronto. Hello?
We can hear you. Keep going.
Hello?
Can you hear us?
Yes, sorry.
No.
So why am I sharing this today? It's because this is how I feel about living in Toronto. Right now, in the wake of everything that's happening, the violent evictions of the encampments, the discovery of unmarked deaths in residential schools, and Black Lives Matter and the Western colonization of Palestine. Today, I'm talking about it because I genuinely wonder why I, a Filipino Muslim, am here in a city of little neighborhoods where I live, far away from where my father was born. Why I get to be here, why I have to be here, whether I want to be here or not, and at whose expense it is that I have a better opportunity to live here in Toronto and to pursue my art in the way that I do. And as Filipino Canadians begin to decolonize, you must also look at what happened in the Philippines. What happened to the Moros and our indigenous peoples in the name of the Republic of the Philippines, whose heritage we celebrate this month. We have things we need to be accountable for. Here's an excerpt from my film. In my dad's view, he is a survivor, a hero, and not a victim of the past. It makes a lot of sense to me why my dad might want to forget the atrocities he went through and just live his life to the fullest. That's his trauma, and he can do whatever he wants with it. Me, I have been displaced and disconnected from my identity and history. That's my trauma, and that's mine to figure out. Hula history is not in the media, and it's not in my school books. And I didn't learn about the burning of Hula until I sought it out, and it barely has a Wikipedia page. The research that I did for this documentary is the closest that I have ever been to Hula, and it bothers me to realize that I may never get to be a Hulawano, and not by my choice. How do you reclaim an identity that was razed to the ground? And how do we ask for justice for things we don't even remember happened? And how do we fight against systems of oppression that want us to forget? I don't have answers, but we all fight in the way that we can. And my dad by living his life to the fullest, and me by keeping the story alive, hoping that we will actually learn from it and find justice or even peace one day. For as long as we remember, there may be a way back. So let's remember, the Spanish Moro Wars. For 333 years, Spanish actively attacked the Sultanate of Sulu. They failed to completely subjugate Moros. Muslim Filipinos were never colonized. The US occupation, 1898 to 1946. The US agreed to honor the Sultanate of Sulu's autonomy, but then they annexed us with the Philippines without our consent. They massacred those who did not fall in line, and they manipulated Moro leaders through the Bates Agreement and the Kiram-Carpenter Treaty. They manipulated us on their terms. The Moro Crater Massacre, March 5 to 8, 1906. Close to 1,000 Moros who fled to the volcano crater of Buddaho were killed despite declaring they had no intentions of fighting. This group include men, women, and children. There are photos of US soldiers posing with the dead, and the US President Theodore Roosevelt congratulated the troops on their victory. The Republic of the Philippines established July 1946, which is different from the Independence Day, June 12, which we celebrate. Land grabbing of Moro ancestral lands, 1950s to 1960s. Through the government-sponsored homestead program, Filipino Christians migrated to resource-rich Mindanao. The post-colonial government declared all of Mindanao as public land or military settlements, allowing Filipino Christians to claim land deeds through a bureaucratic system inaccessible to Moros. Moros are displaced from their ancestral lands. Christian settlements saw investment, and the remaining Moro lands did not. Moros are dispossessed of their land and opportunity and turn to violence to protect their remaining land. The Jabita Massacre, March 18, 1968, 24 Tausug young men were recruited to the Philippine Army only to be executed when they find out that they were being trained to kill their own. The burning of Jolo, February 7 to 14, 1974. For 7 days, the Philippine Army and the MNLF fought in Jolo. which at the time was a thriving Muslim city, and the city was razed to the ground. It happened during the Marcos media blackout. To this day, Jolo has not been rebuilt. Let's remember what happened. When we celebrate Filipino Heritage Month, when you use Kulintang music, when you dance the singkil, and when you dress in our textiles, remember what happened. Because if we don't learn from the past, it will continue. And as you can see, it doesn't just happen in where we're from, it happens where we live, and there's no running from it. White supremacy and colonialism, it entrenches us all, and our job as artists and as people here is to remember. Thank you.
Alia, thank you so much for sharing your words with us. I have to say, I've learned from you probably in the last few minutes than I've learned almost all my life about this part of our country's history. And know that I am actually taking personal responsibility from your words for my own learning going forward. So for that, thank you. I hope I'm saying this okay, but shukran. Thank you. Okay, I gotta breathe. Mila Bonko, I'm very pleased to introduce our next reader and writer. Mila is a personal friend of mine, and she's a children's book writer, poet, and essayist from right here in Edmonton. So I'm pleased to introduce Miss Mila Bonko to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm reading from Treaty 6, specifically from Edmonton. The indigenous name is Amiskosi Waskahikan, which means Beaver Hills House. I came to Edmonton as a university scholar in the early 1980s, and this piece is about the city and my parallel journey of about 40 years from being very colonial-minded to being more aware and respecting of indigenous culture and heritage. Okay. Amiskwasi Waskahikan was not your name when we first met. When I was oh so young and chasing dreams I thought were mine, but were just fuel to sustain a machinery that made only some free. Only some free. Amiskwasi, we would not have recognized each other then, you and I. When I first came, it was only Edmonton I wanted. Only Edmonton and the ideals of the white men who bestowed that name on this land I did not know was stolen. Ransacked for commerce, carved for railways and metal beasts, possible only by dispossession, deception, death. All these were unknown and invisible to me. I was too dazzled by Edmonton's Edwardian and collegiate Gothic architecture. Leather-gloved and tweed-wearing professors, the grandeur of lecture halls and libraries, the symmetry of trimmed lawns and tree-lined paths. From the dusty roads of Bataan and the cramped rooms in Quezon City, Edmonton, you were my success, my due reward. A solid step in my plans to move up the hierarchy. For ranking, classifying, and climbing hierarchies were ingrained in me and structured and sustained by you. How unformed and uninformed we both were. You concealing dark secrets, me planning for upward mobility, both of us feeding a machinery that censored and exploited many. Amiskwasi Waskahikan, you were always there, but nobody told me, nobody showed me. You were buried under oversized malls, glass pyramids, fancy bridges, fake castles. You were smothered by fear and prejudice of people pitted against each other, that those who came before me had spiteful labels for parts of the city, as if we can only be worthy if there were others to spurn. Curry community, Little Mogadishu, Chinatown, Gangtown, white trash, Boyle Macaulay, homeless, puno ng mga pana, don't go there. Wag doon. Far away from home, I turned to my heritage community. Where's best to live? Who shall be my friends? What did they tell me, even the elders? Steer away from those who are not like us. And I listened. I recognized the same divide and conquer tune I was used to from a similar colonial past. The manufactured paranoia of the controlled and exploited, where trust must be exclusive, manipulated, conditional, and compliance is survival. Oh, Canada, you deceived me, for not everyone here is noble, strong, and free. Oh, Alberta, you beguiled many with oily promises of easy wealth, built on the backs of overburdened brown bodies. Oh, Edmonton, city of champions, as you flourished and prospered, you swallowed newcomers' ambitions in food courts, kitchens, hotels, and hospitals. You trampled dignity on your streets, leaving many aimless, helpless. Tell me, who decides who should become noble, strong, and free? Who decides who would be trapped and not allowed to flee? Amiskwasi was kahikan you were not yet when I came. I was different too. Even then, Edmonton, you gave me a home, and I bore you a son who names you as his birthplace. We talk about you, your dazzling beauty, but also the darkness. Through my son's youth, his different eyes, the many different eyes of new people coming, and the sound of primal once silenced voices now rising, we discover many new things about you. Edmonton and Amiskwasi, we have journeyed together so far. But what now, my city, my home? How shall we move forward? How do we learn, unlearn, confess, amend, restore, so that people can dare to dream dreams for themselves, for their children and the future, without being enslaved by the schemes and structures of the past? How do we repair and redirect so that land and people can heal? And not only some, but all may be free, that everyone may have a chance to be noble, strong, and free. So until 4 days ago, this poem ended there with hope, ended on hope. But now with the recent news, I'm more angry and frustrated than hopeful. So this poem got a second ending. Oh, Edmonton, oh, Alberta, oh, Canada, why are you still obscuring, still denying the past? How long will you sustain the fake outrage and apologies and no action policies while protecting the perpetrators? Teach us, show us the truth, the hard, painful truth, past the myths of sorry saying, tolerant, multicultural, happy Canadians. Teach us, show us the truth, the hard, painful truth, and we will not love you less. Oh, Canada, how many more bodies will it take? How much more grief and pain? Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, the fireworks are coming. What are we celebrating on Canada Day? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mila. I know for myself, it's given me pause in terms of looking at my own hometown of Edmonton through your critical lens. So I thank you for that. That takes us to the halfway point of our program. Just a few announcements if you want to take a little bit of a moment yourselves. Before we commence the latter half of our program, we need to mention that this event has been made possible with the support of our supporters, with our sponsors, Canadian Heritage and TD Bank. As you know, following today's event, there will be a draw for some wonderful books, courtesy of the Writers Guild of Alberta. The names will be drawn from the email that you provided in your registration on Eventbrite, and we will actually contact the winners directly if you win. We also want to mention that 4 of today's writers today have been published by Anak Publishing, which is based out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. They, and 4 of the books that are being given away actually are published by Anak as well from our Filipinx authors. So please check out the website and take a look at other publications that they offer. They are called anakpublishing.ca. And another reminder that if you have any comments or questions or just general, anything that's on your mind today, if you could please type them in the chat for our panelists to see, we'd be happy to make sure that they're asked and answered at the end of the program. Okay, so here we go on the next part of a tour of Canada through Philippine eyes. Our next reader, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Teodoro Alquitas. He is a journalist and publisher from Vancouver, British Columbia. He's been covering Filipinos in Canada since immigrating to the country in 1968. Salamat po for joining us, Teodoro. Is Teodoro with us still?
Sorry.
Hello, sir. You ready?
Yeah.
Very good. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. I am Teodoro Alquitas. I am a settler in Canada. I arrived here more than 50 years ago with my 8-year-old daughter. Settled first in Saskatoon and then moved to Winnipeg, where I started the Filipino newspaper Silangan, and moved to Vancouver in 1992, where I am now publishing an online newspaper, Philippine Canadian News.com. I was the first OFW in my family. Most of you know OFW is the Overseas Filipino Workers. I worked in Bangkok, Thailand in the 1960s with an American firm designing an air base in Vietnam. So from Thailand, went back to Manila and now to Canada, where I am now settled in Vancouver in the unceded Coast Salish territories. I'm going to read today an opinion piece I wrote in my website on May 17, 2020, before we discovered the graves of children, indigenous children, before the murder of the Muslim family in London, Ontario. So I wrote this at the height of the anti-Asian crimes happening in Canada. Some of you may know Vancouver had the highest number of incidents of anti-Asian hate, more than California. The whole continent, Vancouver had the most number of anti-Asian hate. So I wrote this opinion piece. An attack on one is an attack on all. A man shoves an elderly Chinese man out the door. In another incident, a man shouts racist slurs at a woman inside the SkyTrain and grapples with a bystander who tries to intervene. A woman walking her dog in the park was punched on the face twice for sneezing. All this happened in Vancouver. The perpetrators were all white men shouting racial slurs. The victims were Asian, except the woman with the dog, who was indigenous. While the current state of racist attacks are blamed on the COVID-19 pandemic, we have to look beyond that and see if other factors are playing into the absurds. We have to remind ourselves that Canada has a long history of racism against the Chinese long before this coronavirus erupted. Just look at how the Chinese railroad workers were treated and the Chinese head tax that effectively banned Chinese immigration into Canada. Even Canada's oldest insurance company, the venerable Sun Life, once excluded Chinese immigrants from getting insurance because of the yellow fever and therefore a high risk. One does not have to look that far to Alberta, where Premier Jason Kenney fired the first salvo in the concerted attack against the Hong Kong-born Dr. Teresa Tam, Canada's top doctor, for allegedly failing to implement measures undertaken by other countries. It was Kenney, as immigration minister under the Harper regime, who tried but failed to ban face covering, niqabs, in citizenship ceremonies. In 2015, he called the niqab a tribal cultural practice where women are treated like property and not like human beings. I wonder what he will say now that we are all encouraged to wear masks to help prevent the spread of the virus. His conservative boss at the time, Andrew Scheer, did not denounce Kenney, nor did he reprimand leadership hopeful Derek Sluan for reinforcing the attacks. Next came the attack by conservative mouthpiece Rebel Media, which mounted a petition calling for the resignation of Dr. Tam. Calgary Herald columnist Licia Carvela followed suit with a stinging attack on the doctor. The Herald, of course, did not offer a contradictory piece in support of Dr. Tam. Comments don't exist on a vacuum, says Recoquet contributor Justin Kong, adding that they are part of a larger current of thought that seeks to reshape and reduce the COVID-19 narrative to the culpability of China, Chinese people, and those who look Asian. He suggests that it feeds into an overaching bid by the ruling classes to shift the blame for current crisis from neoliberalism, corruption, and state failure to a state enemy. We, the other, then become the surrogate state enemy that needs to be destroyed by these self-appointed defenders. The silence of the tongue leads to the violence of the trigger finger. Saturday Review editor Norman Cousins once wrote in the aftermath of the My Lai massacre. He argued that the indoctrination of American soldiers that Vietnamese people are indispensable resulted in the cold-blooded murder of innocent civilians, including children. The ultimate danger to our country, I argue, is not the coronavirus, but the insidious poison of hate cultivated by fear that leads to unprovoked attacks against innocent people. Maraming salamat po.
Mr. Alquitas, maraming salamat po sa inyo. Our next guest today is Monica Batak. Monica is a teacher, community organizer, Vanier scholar, and PhD candidate currently based in Montreal, Quebec. Here's Monica Batak.
Thank you, Jeanette, for the introduction, to Carl for the technical support, salamat to Mila for the invitation, and salamat to Naomi for starting us off in a good way. I feel really honored and so proud today to be part of this group of writers offering important and searing critical commentary about our experiences in Canada and back home. I'm Monica, zooming in from the unceded territories of the Gahikannaga Nation, and today I'll be sharing 3 short works in progress which shed some light on my experiences in Quebec, in Montreal as a racialized student. I've been living here for the past 5 years, and I've learned so much outside and in spite of what is taught in classrooms. Graduate study has afforded me the opportunity to sit, and travel to meet and work with different Filipino community groups across this country. This privilege of travel also holds me accountable to the ways I mobilize my body, my words, my actions towards relationships, towards change. So the three pieces are listed there. The first one is Tour of Canada. Just to describe the image on the slide, it's a 3D building made out of green and blue construction paper titled University and Library. That image, this was created by a group of Filipino newcomer youth in British Columbia as part of what they believed would be a utopian community. So Tour of Canada. Students of Filipino Canadian Studies learn the stories and statistics of struggle, the archetypal plights, sights, and slights of the brave ones, those who traveled to these lands with lips pointed to the sky. I write to the auspicious travelers who too wear filial duty with their own beads of sweat. The second generation inheriting wandering ways, ancestral life ways, the abbreviated heritage of diaspora. Oh, these peculiar conditions of settlement. Those of us who continue to journey forever, visiting in and on and through these lands, these waters, remember to unpack and unload the extra weight. Miseducated Filipino students seek out all that is unspoken, all that has been eclipsed. We unlearn as we wrap ourselves, our bodies, our brains around these difficult vocabularies and embodied translations, to name what we have seen and honor what we know, to return to ourselves. As part of this search, this painful rewriting, many of us continue to travel, and thus the cycle persists. Walking forward, walking around, skirting around paths concealed. A forced migration from home, we move away from home to return to home, self-soothing, spoon-feeding ourselves some neighborhood warmth, gifting pasalubong so we too can remember, so we too can feel like we belong. This next piece is called Gasps of Quebec Air. The two images I'll share in this piece, the first one is an image of foliage growing on a gray 5-story building on the McGill University campus, blue skies, white clouds. There are green trees to the left, and on the building, the vines climb up the building, going from green foliage to dead brown vines. And then the second image is the shadow of foliage seen on the pavement ground. You will find yourself holding your breath as you enter each grocery store, each metro station, each corner dépanneur. The kind gesture, rare olive branch of bonjour, hi, might spare you from sweating, but get ready for the shade. Or silence. The Quebecois context is complicated, so brace yourself. Plan multiple contingency plans for whatever out you need. Breathe. Breathe in the last of the car's AC and pry yourself out of the cracked leather seat. It's been a whole day of driving, limbs locked in chair position. It's been less than an hour in Quebec, and yet you've already lost count of all of these construction cones and closed exits. The summer air is stifling. Someone stole the breeze. Breathe. It's late night, you're alone, and instinct has you triple checking locked doors at each stoplight. A man walks up to your car, knocking on your window, in French at first, using broken English to ask you for a ride, a minute, a beer, $1, a kiss. Look away and stay alert. Inhale, exhale through these repeat encounters. Breathe. You made it through parallel parking on the world's narrowest street, watching the mirrors for no, not just the cars, but the cyclists, and no, not just the cyclists, but the boozing crowds spilling onto the streets. They're living life. Breathe. You sit through obliged niceties, sans cassette, restaurant dining, the city's social norms. One time stretched thin after a long day, after a long week, you force yourself to play tour guide to friends of friends. Cotton mouth out of jokes, out of smiles. You return home, dry heaving into the toilet bowl, disrupted summer sleep. Breathe. You check into the hospital's ER for severe dehydration. You didn't see a Filipina nurse during these visits, and even if you did, I'm not sure you'd feel safe. Be careful at the hospital, or simply put, justice for Joyce. And for those of you who don't know the reference to Justice for Joyce, I'll share a little bit of context. As the daughter of Filipino immigrants, I work every day to unlearn white supremacy. Racism is embedded in Canada's everyday policies and practices. Yet here in Quebec, many people, including political leaders, deny that systemic racism exists. During Filipino Heritage Month, we must be shaken from our sleepy and celebratory state. On September 28, 2020, Joyce Echaquan, an Atikamekw woman, an Indigenous mother of 7, was murdered at a hospital in Joliet, Quebec. And as we hear more about what was already known of the little ones who never made it home, may we as Filipinos be moved and compelled to take action, to use our voices to make change. Claiming Canada means doing our part to own this inherited history of genocide, to make things right. And the image on the slide is a bird's eye view of McGill campus, an archival painting with a mountain in the background and with use of light, delicate colors, white, green, blue, purple, and gray to show you both the landscape and the buildings of campus. And then my last piece is called Misguided Tour. This first image of me is of me, a Filipino woman standing on a campus street. This is McTavish Street, McGill campus. You see the campus buildings and trees. I'm standing wearing a jean blue shirt, black dress, black backpack, looking back towards the mountain, face turned away from the camera. And the subsequent photos as part of this piece are a mix of archival and recent photos of campus, of the arts building, of construction on campus. So, misguided tour. Visitor, behold this mount before the mount, perpetual redirections to keep you confused, keep you sweating, keeping you moving to keep you still. 2021 marks the bicentennial of McGill University, 200 years of seductive tall tales about a philanthropic Scot to whom we owe our education. We study at James McGill's former Burnside Place estate, earnest entrepreneurial empire. Visitor, behold this university built using the good fortune of a man who enslaved, who gained from the transatlantic slave trade, setting up shop for us to climb, to land, to claim. O blessed ones worthy enough of this education, behold these idyllic backdrops, classrooms divine, devoid, the campus, this majestic city, unearth this country's history, find the hidden bones. Watch where you are going, watch where you step. Detour to go right, left, but which directions to repair the wrongs? Visitor, behold this mount before the mount, perpetual redirections to keep you confused, keep you sweating, keeping you moving to keep you still. Salamat everyone, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Monica. Salamat din. Okay, our next reader is also from Montreal, Quebec. He is an artist, writer, and organizer. Welcome to the program, Alan Matudio.
Thanks, Janet. And thank you for everyone who thought of organizing an event like this, and thanks for making me a part of it. So my name is Alan. I'm born in Tiohtià:ke, colonially known as Montreal. I'm a community organizer, visual artist, and recently turned author after publishing my graphic novel, Kasama. I grew up in Côte-des-Neiges, which has the largest Filipino population in the city. I grew up among caregivers, nurses, factory, and retail workers. My entire family settled in this neighborhood. It's my honor to share with you a tour of our home, and the following is an original piece that was created for this event. Uptown Côte-des-Neiges. In a basement apartment on Buret Avenue, My mom, dad, sister, and I were getting ready for bed before hearing a loud bang. Baba, yelled my dad instinctively. It felt like an eternity. We waited in stillness for silence, the signal for guaranteed safety. The event was exceptional, yet somehow not outside the scope of my reality as a kid. I grew up in Uptown, an enclave of Côte-des-Neiges. During my elementary school years, I was already conscious of some of the neighborhood gangs, Cantos, One Ink, Bloods, and Crips. I was cautious of the youth that would hang around Van Horn and Mackenzie Park. Were they gangsters or was it barcada? Maybe I was too influenced by the music of the time. To be honest, I was scared. Everyone looked tough and I often was by myself. In retrospect, I was intimidated by how free they were. They played their music loudly and gathered despite how neighbors may think ill of them. They had each other's backs, the solution for navigating the diaspora. I wasn't as resourceful. My bond with the community was severed when I enrolled in a private high school. I became elitist and often dissociated myself from my Filipino identity. Uptown isn't real, said a friend after explaining where I grew up. As a teenager, I would have probably agreed. As an adult, I laughed. Geographically speaking, how can a segment in Côte-des-Neiges be called Uptown when it wasn't elevated in altitude? Where did this name even come from? I tried to laugh it off. I felt so ashamed to end the conversation by agreeing to disagree. She basically suggested that my history wasn't real, and I let her, and I laughed, complicit in my own erasure. Uptown is real, even if you can Google it. You feel it the instant you step out of Plamondon Metro. Its energy. The behavior that I observed in my youth isn't merely a reflection of the media we consumed. It's the result of oppressive systems. I grew up in the 90s, which coincided with the first, second-generation Filipino youth undergoing adulthood and their parents' transnational trauma. That's an invisible fact, like Uptown. Uptown is invisible. It's in a parallel dimension where invisible people also live. An alternate reality where essential work is taken for granted and hard labor is met with questionable working conditions. The most vulnerable rely on their radiance to create images of brighter days. It's a canvas that's not painted by pigments of mud, and as such, its stories are unlikely to ever be unearthed. What you see as the orange julep, for example, is an iconic Montreal landmark. But for us, it's our employment. Fiesta Filipino is an established bakery, but only the community knows of its baker's legacy on the basketball court. We would dress up for St. Kevin's Mass, but then dress down for Hataw in the church's hall. Plaza Côte-des-Neiges is just plaza. It has a Walmart and a Canadian Tire, but it's more importantly the place where we got our first pet, first bagel, first driving lesson, and watched our first movie in theaters. You see elderly homes and hospitals. We see our titas and titos.
Fire alarm?
Yeah.
You
Okay. It happens pretty regularly. Sorry about that.
have to vacate?
I think it's fine. We'll see.
An unexpected twist. Okay, let us know if you have to. We can come back to you if it means that you're safe. let us know.
I think it's fine. It's fine. It does happen regularly enough.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just finish up.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was part of your reading, like a first.
Let's just say it is at this point, right?
Right.
Uptown isn't a question of geography. It's a mindset and experience. It's the result of labor exploitation and labor rights abuses. It's where families of color share meals within apartment complexes. It's having your children as French to English translators. Here, we don't serve our culture to the adventurous. our streets cater to our needs. Many of us may have moved away, but it remains our home away from home. That's Uptown. Thanks, guys.
Okay, you called it.
Sorry about that.
No, not at all, as long as you're safe. Thank you so much for your words, Alan.
Thank you.
We are going to move to our next presenter. This is Therese Estacion from Toronto, Ontario. She is an elementary school teacher and is also studying to be a psychotherapist. So please welcome Therese.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today with us. Thank you to the organizers for putting this event on and for the invitation. And thank you, Jeanette, for the introduction. I'm coming to you, so a bit of an image description about me. I am a woman with brown skin and my hair is pulled back and I'm wearing dangly earrings, beaded at the top and muskox horn. There will be 2 slides. So the slide you see right now, it's me in my face and I'm in front of Madeline Lake. The next slide will be of the ice road. And the following slide will be of the northern lights, so the ice road during twilight. I'm reading to you from Toronto, but I lived in Yellowknife or Denede for close to 2 years. And both my pieces, the first one is kind of like a canticle. It's a poem about the ice road. It's written in the style of a canticle to Mary. And the second one is a personal narrative essay. So ice road. On the slide right now, you see the ice road at twilight. Part of it is shoveled off for the cars. A little bit about the ice road. So it links Denede to Dada, which is a small community, part of the Dene Nation. 20 minutes via ice road from Denede or Yellowknife, but it would be 45 minutes without the ice road. So it's kind of like a really, everyone anticipates this road being open. Ice road full of ravens, ice road full of slow driving trucks, ice road full of country music, ice road full of frozen eyelashes, ice road full of braking, ice road full of dog breath, ice road full of spilt coffee, ice road full of slurs, ice road full of sediments of trauma, ice road full of colonial melancholia, ice road full of reaching for a child, ice road full of heaving RCMP, sacrilegious and spurious, ice road full of Mountie spit, of Mountie boots, of roadkill, ice road full of tires slash, northern lights out, ice road full of lines from blades, ice road full of paw prints, of foxes, of coyote, of lynx, all crepuscular, ice road full of houseboaters, green and ancestrous, ice road full of settler freezer burn, ice road full of groans, ice road blue and more blue, robin's egg and true indigo, ice road shoveled and polished, ice road full of fish oil, fish fry, fish raw, ice road full of cold aurora and furling, ice road full of neutrality like a glass of water, to those devoted to the ice road full of shapeshifters and singers, to those drifting on the ice road full of a shorter way home, to those beseeching tenderness on the ice road rising with a locked steam of the midnight sun, ice road belonging to the Dene ways of the scent of tan tide, sundog lights, northern lights, cigarette lights, a Dada foggy morning, a pre-Helian morning, Masicho ice road, Masicho Dene Nation, Masicho from someone south of the equator who could only ever meet you here, ice road mirroring, repairing, mystic ice road, holy ice road, I cruise on you during the new moon without lights. The next slide would be the aurora, so it would be the northern lights. I took this photo on the ice road. And it's a personal narrative called Parka. It's about a parka that I found in the Salvation Army in Yellowknife. The parka from the Salvation Army has a blue shell. Inside is a long, heavy black wool coat. It is musty, covered with the dust from Repulse Bay. It smells like smoke and coffee. Its hood is lined with Arctic fox, and the stitching across the bottom is simple, rectangles with diamonds in the middle. It's priced less than it looks. I often visit the Sally Ann on Franklin Street when I'm feeling lonely or bored. That day, I saw the parka just hanging behind the cash register on a bent wire coat hanger. It came with a note that said, "This coat has an outer shell of Canadian Mist fabric and an inner duffel coat. Canadian Mist is the fabric that we all used until the mid-1990s when Commander came along. Canadian Mist is better. There's a lot of fabric in this coat. You could recut to make a smaller one. The duffel came from the Bay store in Repulse Bay, 1988, so it is good, thick duffel. If nothing else, the duffel will make mukluk and mint linings. It is still good, it is reusable. I asked to try the jacket on. I had no intention of buying it. The zipper was too hard to handle for my amputated hands. The arms were too short, and it weighed almost 10 pounds. An Inuk grandmother from a region I do not know saw me and said, "You look good." I told her, "I may not get it. The zipper's too tricky." "You can make the zipper shorter, and then it will be easy," she told me. I come here with my grandson. I take care of him since his mother can't. Her grandson came to show me the free toy he got, neon green flubber. He said, "We come here to make friends. You meet all kinds here." Later, I will sit in the jacket on my couch and begin romanticizing as an outsider. I go on YouTube and look for videos of Nuayat. In one video, everything is white. White water, white land, white crisp, 1,000 people, white snowmobiles, white roads. There's a health center, a church, and a grocery store. Every white mound looks indiscernible to an outsider, but underneath each mound is a network of relationships, impossible to interpret if you're not from there. A bit south of Nuayat sits Arviat, a city in the Kivalliq region, a region in Nunavut that has the highest suicide rate. In 2017, the short documentary Dancing Toward the Light was released by the CBC. The film follows a group of youth from Arviat. They prepare for a dance competition, a response to the region's suicides. The dances are used as a way to cope, work out some cathartic expression. In the film, one of the dancers, dubbed Crazy Legs, Andy Walokchuk, his voice speaks clearly as a shot of him is shown dancing. He's spinning in slow motion in his room. His legs are moving, bending in unpredictable patterns, flailing at his knees. They land with unforeseen stability, his soul's determined to find the ground. Crazy Legs. Once you start remembering the people who you lost, once you start thinking of them like that, you'll know how to dance, just like that. Now, Crazy Legs is in the middle of the cemetery, covered in snow. Little white mounds. Each mound is marked by a simple white wooden cross. Each mound known only by those who live in Arviat. Every white mound looks indiscernible to me, an outsider. Closer to the end of the video, Crazy Leg returns. He's standing underneath the northern lights. The green amorphous lights dance as he stands in the middle of the empty street, snow-covered. The white ground is still underneath his smoky fluorescence. Andy, we're losing our elders. The film cuts to a group of elders dancing in the community center. It's dark. They move in slow motion. Green and pink strobe lights pulse around them. I'm no longer up north when I watch this video. I'm hot and sweating on my couch. The jacket is stored in my parents' basement where they keep sacks of Rooster brand rice and empty tins of skyflakes filled with buwad and tablia for sekwate and champorado. I go out on my balcony to cool off, a settler from the islands in the big smoke. Across the collection of condos and shiny cars, a giant billboard protrudes. It reads, "Horizon, 40% off. This country is land. All land is filled with mounds. Some are reaching, sonorous despite the white noise." Thank you so much.
Thank you, Salamat, Trace. I love the North, and so I'm very happy that you shared your story with us, and hopefully someday everyone here can experience the feeling of being up there. So thank you again. Last but not least, our final reader today is Jenna Lee, Austria. Jenna Lee has served multicultural communities in various professional capacities. She's the founder of Filipino Talks, a school board initiative that builds bridges between educators and Filipino families. Welcome, welcome, Jenna Lee.
Hi, everybody. So this is a complicated love letter to those from my complicated hometown. Nowadays, I live in Toronto, but I come from Sarnia, which is at the bottom of Canada. So, okay, we're looking at a picture of me. Oh, go back a little bit. There we go. We're looking at a picture of me and the Sarnia sign and a map of Southern Ontario. You come from a place near the southernmost edge of Canada, population 73,000. Well, give or take 1,000 or two. It's been a while since you've been home. Sarnia is a small city, but locals call it a town. You're a townie, born and raised, and you're proud of it. One thing Sarnia is known for, the twin bridges that connect Canada and the USA. When people talk about your hometown, they usually say, Sarnia, yeah, I've driven across those bridges. You'll smile politely, but then if they say, Sarnia, I tried those fried trucks under the bridge. You guys have the best damn fries in the world. Then you'll be best friends. And although your skin is brown, their words will tickle you pink. So yes, you're a townie, but your skin is brown. It's not weird to you at all. When you were growing up, there were over 200 Filipino families in Sarnia. There were so many that this isn't even a picture of them because they'd never all fit into the same shot. But when you see group photos of other communities, you think, yeah, we could double this, triple this, quadruple this easily. But why would Filipinos go to Sarnia, people ask? Why not somewhere bigger like Toronto or Vancouver? Well, Toronto and Vancouver don't have the chemical valley, the petrochemical industry, where most of your dads worked their blue-collar jobs. Esso, Bayer, Shell, Nova, all of those and so many more. Now, the chemical valley isn't a place that outsiders understand. When they Google it, the search auto-populates with horrible questions like, what is wrong with Sarnia and how polluted is Sarnia? As a proud townie, it pisses you off. Those smokestacks gave you a nice house, good food, piano lessons, summer vacations, and even extra money in your pocket while other kids were crying over their OSAP applications. What is wrong with Sarnia, indeed? But what about racism, people ask? Surely in a town like that, locals hated immigrants. You shake your head. Honestly, I thought we fit in pretty good, you say with a sheepish shrug. Didn't really think about it too much. Outsiders always think towns are super racist, and you know it's not like that. But did you even know you were Filipino, people ask. When you were a teenager, the titas and titos of Sarnia gathered everyone together for a huge show for the Kalayaan, the 100th anniversary of Philippine independence. For 9 whole months, the community met up every single week. The elders gathered the youth together and taught folk dances like Pantango sa Ilaw and Tagalog songs like Paru Parong Bukid, making sure that it wasn't just about a show, but something bigger. That the youth didn't just look Filipino on the outside, but that even in a blue-collar Canadian town, they felt it on the inside too. But when the show was over, your peers started to grow up. Every year, more and more youth moved away after high school graduation. Without a university in Sarnia, there was no reason to stay. And even if someone wanted to stay, their parents wouldn't have let them. It was time for the children to succeed in life. And success meant moving to places like Toronto and Vancouver, while the parents stayed behind in town. And when it was finally your turn to leave, you didn't look back either. Not because you didn't want to, of course. It's because the more time passed, the more it hurt to look. Soon, your school was torn down. And next, the hospital where your titas and titos worked. And then the mall. And even the community center, where you first learned how to precariously balance candles on your head for Pantango sa Ilaw, was demolished. And while the Sarnia News was always announcing yet another demolition, to your dismay, Sarnia even ended up in your faraway city's news too. The research studies, the documentaries, the articles. The news was never about your town though. It was about the chemical valley. Everyone always knew that the ones affected the most by the pollution were the indigenous, with the Amjinan located with the chemical valley literally in their backyards everyone knew that the Indigenous, especially on the res, dealt with the absolute worst conditions. But then, over time, you notice the Chemical Valley research hitting closer and closer to home. Asian women at risk, Asian women having higher rates of cancer, doctors increasingly concerned about Asian women. And soon enough, that research becomes your reality. Eventually, it gets to the point when the parents don't even tell their children when the PHIDEAS pass. There are just too many. They don't want you to come home from university, from your travels, from your new career. The people who taught you how to dance and sing, who made your costumes and applauded you the loudest, they wouldn't want you to leave your faraway city for yet another funeral because you're successful now. The elders agree that this was the cost of emigrating to a beautiful city nestled at the bottom of Canada, where the bridges reveal Lake Huron to the right and the Chemical Valley smokestacks to the left. A place for children to be raised, but not to stay, they said. But oh, how they love to brag about Sarnia's first generation. We're doing so unbelievably well. Look at the professors, the engineers, and wow, so many doctors, they say. We did such a good job with them. It's a community's proof of success, isn't it? Blue collar to white collar within just one generation. But on nights when you're alone in your faraway city and you start getting homesick, you scan Facebook for Sarnia nostalgia groups. Hundreds of people reminiscing about the old places that are long gone. And as you scroll through the names, you can't help but wonder, are you the only Filipino in the room? So when there's nothing left and no one to come home to, can a place still be home? Well, when you're up in the middle of the night looking for the faces and places that make up your past, the answer is yes, 1,000 times yes. You've succeeded, not in spite of where you've come from, but because of it, because of the people who became before you, because of the people who taught you who you are. And if you remember that, then there will always be a place to call home, even after the buildings are gone and the people are too. So go be successful in your white-collar job in your faraway city, as long as you never forget your roots as a brown-skinned townie. Thank you.
I have a question actually that I put in the chat. And so this is Mila, sorry, this is Mila. If all the panelists can turn on their videos again. I have a question that I put in the chat and feel free to answer it. So I'd like to know from the other writers, if you're able to write anything that does not include your Philippine heritage.
Recording in progress.
I'm so
Right,
sorry.
like right now, Mela, or for what? For when?
No. This is a question.
From
Oh,
the
sorry.
chat.
Sorry. Yeah, that Janet. Yeah, it's a question from the chat. But Janet is back here, so I'll leave the floor to her.
Fire alarm, but I'm afraid something else is happening. Too hot. It's way too hot. My tech gave up on me, so I apologize, everybody. We're at the Q&A now.
Yeah, Janet, I put a question in the chat. I'd like to know from the other writers if they're able to write anything that does not include their Philippine heritage, and anyone can answer it.
Okay. Does anyone want to start? Maybe we go with the last person, perhaps, Jenny Lee. Right.
Hi. Yeah, I'm back here. So yes, are you able to write anything that doesn't include your Philippine heritage? Yes, but why is the question. It's so interesting because I think about this often as someone. I've always been writing stories since like elementary school, right? And in elementary school, it was always white characters. And I was that kind of student where the teachers would collect my stories and then read them to other classes and be like, look, someone in your school wrote this, isn't it a big deal? And no one ever said to me, how come all of your characters are white? Why aren't you in your stories? And it wasn't something I noticed until later. I kept getting praised for having these white plot lines and white characters. And so now as an adult, I think, well, that wasn't right. So I feel like I'm trying to go back in time and reclaim those stories and put myself in them for once.
Anyone else have additional thoughts on that? I love that answer though. Why? At this point, that the bases are covered on everywhere else. So I understand.
I mean, I'd like to answer as well to that question. Not just why, but why do we always have to be confined to our Filipino X-ness? I mean, we don't ask this from white writers. We can have a universality of experience that doesn't always, I mean, we see it through many different lenses. The Philippine lens is one of them. We can see, I mean, grief. I've had so many people come up to me about the universality of grief and reaching out to people that aren't necessarily Filipino, but I mean, my second book, The Significance of Moths, is titled that way because there's that superstition that when somebody recently passes, they're visited by a moth or a butterfly or something along those lines. And I had this lovely woman who, when I shared this experience and this superstition with her, she said that when she went to go visit her sister's grave, she saw a bird in the tree and the bird was singing so beautifully to her. And she knew that that was her sister. And this person wasn't Filipino, but it just gave us a dialogue and understanding and a connection that has nothing to do with my Philippine X-ness. So in counter to why should I stick with that? Like, why not? I mean, I don't think we should have to confine ourselves to one part of our experience because, I mean, we run a gamut of identities, experiences, et cetera, just based on who we are and what we've experienced in life and where we've been, et cetera. So I really don't think that we should limit ourselves to just being that one thing that people expect of us. We should go and we should be exploratory. We should, challenge our own boundaries. So yeah, in a counter to that point, that's what I think. Thanks.
Do we have a couple more of the authors? Perhaps any thoughts on that as well, in terms of limiting yourself or not limiting yourself to that particular, I guess, our own genre of writing?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Doro, yeah.
Yeah, to address that question. I don't know what the intent of the question was. I mean, as Filipino writers, of course, we write about our roots, our struggles, from the Philippines to here. So it's just natural that we write. But if we're writing fiction, yeah, we could have other characters that are not related to our Filipino heritage. But we are in this event now, most of us are reading about nonfiction.
Right.
So I mean, for me, and also, like, I've been here 50 years, so I like to have my young children, the Filipino youth, to know where I come from, what were my struggles. So it's just natural for me to write about that.
Right. And that is so important, sir, right? To be able to share some of that knowledge with our younger generation. So people like you and obviously the rest of our writers, you're putting our oral history in books that can continue on, because of course, everything else, we're not here forever, but the words in books and publications on.
If we don't document our life stories, who will do it for us? You think the white writers will write about the domestic workers or the struggle against racism, the way we experience it? It is us that will write about this.
That's fair. That's very good. Okay. Anyone else on that, or can we move on to another question? I think we're good.
Oh, yeah, let's move on.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I guess just quickly to jump on what Manong Ted said and what everyone said. I've been asked this question before, and again, like, it's fair enough, but I feel burdened by this question as a writer, as an artist. it hurts to be asked it, and though I appreciate it being asked, so I can say the thing that I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
It's just there, for me, the way I interpret it, and I don't know what the intentions are, is that as though there's like this neutral base of being a writer, and I'm not that neutral. I'm like this neutral base plus like a bit of a spice of being Filipino. I find it so like the Filipino identity too is like it's kind of like essentialized, like as you can see from everyone here. What is the Filipino heritage? The beautiful thing about a Filipino heritage is like the Filipino identity is quite young, right? Like as a country, but like the people who make up the Philippine Islands and the people whose heritage is tied from them, like we've been on those islands for 700,000 years, and we're not defined necessarily by the Filipino identity, which was like given to us and so over like 150 years, right? So I don't know, like it just feels a little bit like as though we're making a choice, right? Where like I can't remove that from my history and my being and my way of thinking. I can't go into my brain and remove it when I write, so it's like, so I guess like for me, my question back is like, what are we thinking is neutral, and why do we not feel like we're a part of that neutralness? Like, why does it feel like we're a top hat almost? So yeah, that's all I have to add to that.
Good. Okay. I'm going to move on to another question. I apologize again. I don't know if one has already been asked before, but in terms of your writing, we obviously know that a lot of it is real. It's the words that you put on paper because you've experienced many things. But is all of it, or are there words that perhaps someone else had experienced that you interspersed with what you write, whether it's in order to summarize sort of the collective experience, or has it all been your personal experience? Because that gives it a different kind of power, that you're reading something that came from your own life, right? Alan, we haven't heard from, hopefully he's okay with that fire alarm, so maybe.
Sure. Yeah, I think for everything that I write, everything I draw has a very personal component to it.
Yeah.
Kind of touching on the previous question, like I'm so immersed with, for example, music, modern music from the Philippines, for example. I do keep track of some of the news that's going on there, volunteering with the community. So for me, it's hard not to write about Filipino things, and it's really what naturally comes to me as a writer. So going back to this question of, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but following up this question of personal experiences, like it's as much as I can, it's all me, and that's what comes natural in my writing.
Right. Does anyone feel like they need to be the voice? Like, I mean, you're speaking your own words, but for the other authors, that responsibility is on your shoulder. Is that the so-called burden you put on yourself, or is that sort of an expectation that whether it's your publisher, whether other artists and writers put on you? Does that make sense? Like there are people out there, or other people in culture that say they don't necessarily want to speak for everybody. But are you speaking for everybody, or are you speaking solely for your own reality? Right?
For me, as a publisher,
right.
Sorry. For me, as a publisher and editor, I feel that I have to give voice to our community. That is why I'm in publishing. Right. And that is why I'm writing. I mean, who can, as I said, who can give voice to our masses, to our poor in this diaspora, who are being discriminated? Do you think the CBC will write about their struggles as much as I could? That's why I feel that I have to do this in my publication. Even 40 years ago when I started Silangan, That was the intent. Because there are so many kababayan that are voiceless. Why should I exert effort, writing and publishing, financing this venture, and not write about and not give voice to the voiceless?
Chris C. Gatchalgan, I'm wondering from your perspective, coming from the LGBT community as well, do you feel the responsibility there in terms of speaking as a Filipinx person from that community too? Because that's also something that's sort of toward the line, whether you can be that voice for the community in the larger scheme of things, right?
Yeah, I mean,
what do you think?
I actually am very resistant. I really resist the that notion that I need to speak for everyone, other Filipinx or other queer Filipinx for that matter, because I think to accept that is actually to cave into yet another colonial trope, right? There's only so many people. There's only so many Filipinx or brown folks you can let in. I mean, honestly, the correct approach, the proper approach is to hear as many Filipinx voices as possible, right? So I'm really, that notion is, that notion is something that I really am very, I don't take well to. I as an artist, I speak only for myself, and I don't claim to speak for anyone else. So.
You understand where I'm coming from. Some people, like, for example, someone will call me from the media in my own profession and will say, do you have someone that will speak for your community because this and this and that is happening, across the ocean?
Yeah.
And you feel like, should you, or is it something that you delegate?
It's, I think, if I may, segue into a question that I think one of the questions that I think was thrown around before today, is it easier for racialized writers to be published these days? And if so, well, I think that was the question. I think it was phrased, and I think it's actually a double-edged sword, because I think, yes, there is greater awareness of racialized authors, and on the part of book publishers. I think book publishers understand that their funding, the council funding is dependent on engaging a diverse array of writers. However, there's this expectation that if you are, for example, Filipinx, that you should be able to speak and be knowledgeable of all things Filipinx or Filipino, and that really erases the reality. For me, for example, as a second generation Filipinx Canadian, it erases my reality of not really, I'm in my mid-40s. I'm just now really connecting to my Filipinx culture, and on certain things, certain Filipinx issues, like at certain Filipinx subject matter, I'm just as ignorant as the average white person, right? So, so there, yes, it is easier. I think there is a greater, there is more hunger on the part of publishers to highlight the voices of racialized folks. However, there's like an implicit expectation that you write, on the part of some publishers, not all, but on the part of some publishers, that you write from a particular perspective, or that you be knowledgeable about certain things. And again, it goes back to what Shirley, I just want to reiterate what Shirley was saying, that we shouldn't, that expectation should not be levied on us. We should be able to write about anything we want. And my Filipinxness and queerness, I think, will inevitably be part of everything I write, whether I'm writing about an explicitly Filipinx subject or not. But I think that pressure is, it's something I really, really resist as an artist. So.
No, I really, really appreciate this. For the other authors, unfortunately, we are very close to our teams. So I can't express enough, I think, on behalf of everybody else that watched today. I can't, fully explain how wonderful this is. And hopefully with everything going on in the pandemic and as restrictions allow, we'll be able to do this in a more intimate, more in-person. Ati Mila is probably on that already, halfway through the planning for when the time comes. So please continue to follow for the audience. Have all their events, Facebook and Instagram as well. Follow.
Thank you very much, everyone. As I thank you for the writers, thank you for the host, Janet, and all the other speakers, and for all, of course, the audience for staying with us. And hopefully you will stay tuned for all the other events being put in by Saludo. We thank our sponsors. If you want to know more about our writers groups, please write using this email, and we will direct your questions to the various regions or cities where you may want to join a writers group or just know more about the authors here. So thanks again, everyone. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. Mabuhay.
Okay.